Listen to the Impact Podcast on all your favorite podcast platforms, including Apple iTunes, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Audible, Spotify, Stitcher, and of course, at impactpodcast.com. This edition of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by ERI. ERI has a mission to protect people, the planet, and your privacy, and is the largest fully integrated IT and electronics asset disposition provider and cybersecurity-focused hardware destruction company in the United States and maybe even the world. For more information on how ERI can help your business properly dispose of outdated electronic hardware devices, please visit eridirect.com. Welcome to another edition of the Impact Podcast. This is a very special edition. We've got Lori Hunt with us. She's the Executive Director of Environmental Social Governance at Amgen. Welcome to the Impact Podcast, Lori.
Thank you very much, John. I'm excited to be here.
Well, you hold a very important role at Amgen, and Amgen's a very big company with a very big footprint that makes really moves the needle when they make big decisions like this to go all in with ESG and other sustainability like-minded programs. But before we get talking about the great and important work you're doing there, let's talk a little bit about Lori Hunt. Where did you grow up and how did you even get here, Lori?
Okay, well, it's a real privilege to have to work at a great company like Amgen, where our mission is to serve patients. Then doubly great to have a role in ESG, where I get to help execute and communicate about all the awesome, amazing work Amgen does.
Yeah.
And that's a tremendous honor. So how did I get here? My journey to ESG is probably less traditional than most and decidedly opportunistic and fortuitous. I was in healthcare delivery before Amgen and decided to get my executive MBA while I was still working.
Okay.
And in that program, I was on a team with an Amgen employee. And she asked me before the program ended to come and work for her. So that was 19 years ago.
Wow.
And I only interviewed that first role. After that, I sort of just went where the company needed me. And for the first 9 years, that was roles in regulatory and safety, which gave me a great overview of biotechnology and really helping me to understand the industry. And then Amgen made a decision corporately to start a corporate-wide business transformation project. And they created an internal group that was of employees. And I ended up being asked to join that. And they trained us on a methodology for transformation and change management. And I thought that was also a tremendous opportunity, something I really loved. And so I did business transformation for the company for almost 9 years, again, another 9 years. And part of my client group was actually corporate affairs, which is where our corporate responsibility was run out of. So I'd been working with them on and off for a few years, and I thought I'd retire doing transformation work. Honestly, it was fun and rewarding. Oh. But my boss and I had career development discussions regularly, and I told her after Amgen that I really didn't know that there was a next role for me. After Amgen, I was thinking I'd go into nonprofit and sort of give back because of what a great company Amgen has been to me and how lucky I felt to end up there. You know, you have to remember, it's a suburban community, safe schools, no traffic. I'm 6 miles from work. How do you find that anywhere else in California?
That's like the dream. You're living the dream.
Tell her, I know. And so I always thought I'd leave. And then when the company decided to really take CSR and turn it into ESG, they knew they needed a more formal program. And my boss remembered my interest in nonprofit work and some of the work I'd already done with corporate responsibility. And the CEO staff decided they were going to ask me to lead the program. So it was more than just my interest, obviously. They wanted me to bring the transformation tools and the change management methodology to the team. And they knew they already had a couple of really deep experts that were in there. So I didn't need to be an expert to start. I had that. And so now the team and I are working together. It's been a huge learning journey for me, but it's ignited my passion for ESG. And meanwhile, the team and I have expanded the scope and really changed the way we talk about ESG.
When was that transition? When did you become the executive director of ESG at Amgen?
March of 2001, so 18 months ago.
March of 2021.
Sorry, right. 2021.
Okay,
yes.
Got it. Okay, just want to make sure I have the math right. Great. So, fascinating. Okay, so let's step back first. For our listeners and viewers, first of all, to find Lori and her great colleagues at Amgen, you can go to www.amgen.com, Amgen, AMGEN.com. How big is Amgen? Over how many employees? Over how many countries? Just to tee this up and give our listeners and viewers some scope.
Okay, so we are 24,000 employees roughly.
Yep.
We operate in 100 countries, but we only have physical presence in 75.
Got it. Still, that's quite large. That's a big mountain to climb. So, Lori, when you joined Amgen, and when I got involved actually in the let's just say the sustainability field, ESG wasn't part of our vernacular lexicon. Didn't exist, that acronym. It seems as though ESG now is undeniably here to stay, and an unstoppable trend that is going to take us from a linear to circular economy. Is that how you see the world as well?
Yeah, I mean, I thought the same thing, and you're going to hear some of my research, because
sure.
What I found is that the whole concept of ESG is not new. It's just the jargon, to
right.
your point, that is completely changed. Corporate responsibility has been an important feature in history since antiquity, and social purpose was defining trait even then. There's been a push-pull relationship with social purpose throughout history, with governments mandating or controlling errant behavior when it occurred. However, corporate responsibility in the recent decades was much more adjacent and reactive to mission. Okay. Some of it more about public relations and branding. Right. Whereas the modern ESG that we're seeing now is integrated with business purpose and inextricably linked to the operations of business. So I think the recent momentum that you've seen in ESG has been driven by three factors. Sort of some key world events, which I'll go into, public demand, and then the fact that ESG is good business. And so, the public events aren't going to surprise you that I think have drawn it. And that's the 2015 Paris Climate Accord. That gave ESG a shot in the arm.
Right.
Because legislators started putting requirements on investors, who started putting requirements on companies. And then you had COVID and the death of George Floyd, and those brought out all the key social aspects and made them, the prominence, the clear implications and global visibility to various types of inequality.
Right.
Then on the public demand side, it's interesting because I don't know if you've heard of it, but there's a company called Edelman who does the Edelman Trust Barometer annually.
Of course.
In 2021, the Edelman Trust Barometer showed that for the first time, the public trusted corporations more than any other entity. And with that trust comes expectations and demands. And it seems that the public believes that governments haven't been able to solve problems, so they're turning to corporations to do it. And then you've got the constant media barrage of catastrophe, which has made people anxious to support any company doing the right thing and punish those who are doing the wrong things. Along with that, you've got employees, which every company will tell you, they're really making demands now, and they can set expectations, and employees want to work for companies that are doing the right things and that have a social purpose. And that's driving business everywhere. So I think those are really the key public demand pieces.
Fully agree with you.
And then you've got,
and I see it your way. But I want to just go into it, and although I see it exactly the way you do, and I'm so thrilled that someone with your vision is leading Amgen in this very important part of the of our future. What is that recent, quiet, behind the scenes, even a little bit in front of the scenes drumbeat been recently with some states divesting themselves of funds that are supporting ESG, good ESG behavior now, their state pension funds, and other type of behavior like that? Why a backlash in ESG? I could see backlashes in other things, but I haven't met a person in any economic strata in society or any race or ethnicity or any political affiliation that doesn't want their kids and their grandkids to breathe cleaner air and drink cleaner water and have more equity in this world. I don't understand why this backlash.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great question. And I think the best example I can give you is, since I started in this role, my brother has been sending me articles at least once a week that are written to oppose or discredit ESG. It's kind of typical older brother harassment.
Right.
But I'm glad he does, because I really believe that to make a cogent argument, you have to understand both sides
100%.
of the issue.
Yeah, you're right.
So my takeaway, rightly or wrongly, my opinion only, is that there are two things irritating a segment of stakeholders. And they are noisy, but I think they're small. So one is when companies weigh in really loudly on controversial political topics that aren't clearly tied to their mission, and that's a little risky. The other thing is that I think there's actually, especially recently, been a mischaracterization about what ESG is supposed to do. So there's a belief that if a business isn't by nature ESG positive, that it shouldn't be able to have a good ESG score. But I don't think that makes sense, because the purpose of ESG is to assess a company's operations for risk, and it wants companies to be transparent about their issues and address how they intend to improve them. If a business is legal but unpopular, let's take the example of oil producers, it's still important to know that they're improving safety for their employees and reducing their carbon footprint and improving safety of their ships to prevent leaks. I think ESG is
have more board diversity and have more inclusivity and other great things that we can do. Right. Gotcha. Makes sense.
So ESG just evaluates business operations. I think it's up to the public to vote with their pocketbooks and their feet if they don't like a business's purpose.
That's so interesting. Give me, I'm in a unique position where over the last 15 years, I've had about 1,700 or so wonderful leaders like you come on this show. So some of the common themes that I get to learn about is, where you start and where you are, but also where a company started from a genesis perspective, from culture and a DNA perspective. So where was Amgen from a cultural and DNA perspective before you took this very important role? So when you started, what did it look like when you started in this role? And how have you evolved that culture to create inside champions or ambassadors to keep this movement and to spread the word, since you're in 100 countries, 75 physically, with 24,000 employees? It's much more than one person can do themselves, obviously.
Yeah, a lot more than we can do ourselves. So let me start with where it was when I started.
Right.
So in 1991, they created the Amgen Foundation, and that was really our first foray into that corporate responsibility place. And the Amgen Foundation is focused on creating the scientists of the future. We have 4 educational programs for students, and they run the gamut of, contributing to Khan Academy, to online lab exchange with, and training scholars, both in college and in high school. And those programs are so mature at this point. Last year alone, we had 27,000 students 27 million, sorry. Wow. 27 million students access our content. Whoa. So, that's a very exciting program. But the next thing wasn't until the early 2000s that we started our environmental sustainability team. And at the beginning, it was much more of a grassroots effort, and then it grew, and now it's probably our most mature element of the 8. When I joined, sometime in those 2 decades between, I don't have a lot of good data on it, but we adopted 5 other elements, because we have 7 elements when I joined. And they were, business ethics and DI&B and responsible sourcing, ethical research. And I am absolutely sure there's another one. But here's the problem. So this is what I'm going to tell you as I came in. When I first joined, there were these 7 elements, and they were all great and doing incredible work. But I would get stopped in the hallway and asked, tell me about ESG. And I could never recall the 7 elements. So I kept thinking to myself, it was like someone asking me about Snow White's dwarves or Santa's 12 reindeer. I just couldn't remember it.
Right.
And so one of the first things my team did, plus even when I did, people don't know offhand what ethical research means. So it didn't tell you anything. So one of the first things my team did is we worked on finding a way that was more aligned to our mission to communicate what ESG is. And we came up with what we call the 4 healthies: healthy people, healthy society, healthy planet, and a healthy Amgen. And the work is still done in those elements that I described, because those are the teams in our business that do the work. But instead of talking about them as their individual elements, we roll them up into these 4 pillars that are much easier to communicate. And the progress we've made with our staff in having them be able to articulate the program and understand what it means to them and to the world is huge. So I think that was one of our first big wins. And it was simply because my memory is not good enough to remember 7 elements.
Who can read, first of all, I think, but it's brilliant. Really what your team did was they simplified it and made it gettable by everybody, which is so smart, because then all of a sudden you have 24,000 evangelists and ambassadors working with you, moving the needle here.
That's right.
That's great. So wait a second. So you started, so really, let's go back. In 91, that was an educational structure that Amgen created, which has now paid massive dividends now that it's 31 years old or so, with 21 million, 27 million people accessing it. And then you started getting involved with sustainability in the early 2000s, which was in the United States a very, very early adoption, comparatively speaking. So really, it's been really a great part of Amgen's culture and DNA for quite a long time now. This is not just new. You didn't just take the role and start from scratch. There was a lot of substance to work with, to start with.
No, that's right. And I honestly, I think it's important I not take credit for how ingrained ESG is in the culture of Amgen. When you start with the mission to serve patients, and I know that all of our peers have missions that are similar, but I'm telling you, people really breathe it. Like, people join Amgen because they want to take care of patients, because the diseases we serve are grievous. This isn't, never mind.
Right.
We're treating really serious illness, and people stay because we are such a purpose-driven company.
Right. Talk a little bit about now, you said where you started and where you are. Talk about your operations. How have you now integrated ESG into the operations, and how has that evolution been?
Okay, so it's probably when I joined, you had the 7 elements. And one of the things we realized was that was still really focused on the corporate responsibility side because ESG covers so much more. So we added a variety of topics that we cover, like cybersecurity and product quality and product safety and human capital management, which previously were so ingrained into the culture of our company and the way we work that nobody had ever considered them as items that might fall under ESG or have disclosure requirements. So that was a big part of our first year too, was adopting those new places. So then if I gave you the example, of how it's ingrained, I want to come back to cybersecurity.
Yeah, me too.
Where,
me too. Yeah. Yeah.
I know that's a favorite of yours.
Yeah, it is.
So protecting personal information that's been entrusted to us is extremely important.
That's right.
But we don't stop there. Amgen created a global community of employees, security advocates called Sentinels. And this program is one of the largest of its kind in the private sector, with over 800 employee participants representing 34 countries and every function within the company.
Right.
So this has the benefit of making information security everyone's job, and we're all aware of how important it is.
Right, got it.
I can let you come to cybersecurity, or I can give you another example. Which would you prefer?
Well, I want to hear a little bit about your cybersecurity success. Okay. This is great. This is awesome.
Well, and the other example we have is in our manufacturing drugs for patients.
Yeah.
We have to focus on cost effectiveness, but it never comes at the cost of quality. So Amgen builds in quality, beginning with the design of the medicine, all the way through to the development, manufacturing, distribution to patients. And we include more than 250 quality checks and perform an in-depth analysis of our manufacturing performance to continuously improve it for every product.
Wow.
So, a few examples of how it's ingrained deeply into our operations.
Great examples. And for those listeners and viewers who've just joined us, we have Lori Hunt with us today. She's the Executive Director of ESG at Amgen. And to find Lori and her wonderful colleagues, you can go to www.amgen.com. Lori, 75 countries, you have physical facilities, 100 companies you're in, you got 24,000 employees. ESG, what means a lot, can be taken widely or narrowly. How do you assess the geography that you're in and continue to move the mission forward while assessing all the exterior geographies that you're dealing with, not just the United States? Being a director of ESG for a company that's just located in the United States and dealing in the United States is one challenge unto itself. You're now, head of ESG at Amgen, which is a multinational corporation. How does that juggling act work for you?
So it doesn't feel like too much of a juggling act, honestly. Okay. And it may be the way we're structured, because but my team's job is to report the global ESG information. Okay. So, whether that's environmental information or DI&B information, whatever it is. But each of our country offices, a lot of them have also started local reporting. So some of them because they want to, and some of them because it's becoming required, like in Europe.
Right.
And so the bigger challenge that I'm having isn't so much the juggling, trying to figure out, where to worry about geographies, but instead, I need to make sure our messages and our data all rolls up to the same numbers. And, because there's someone out there with way too much time on their hands who's going to calculate it up if I'm not careful. So I have to be on top of the way every country does its own, public reporting or statements about our ESG work. And that's been the challenge in trying to sort of wrangle all of that.
Well, speaking of that, then that rolls perfectly into my next question. How did you decide to track your ESG progress and then report on it? Because I've read a lot of impact or ESG or CSR reports. They're called different things for different organizations. And that can also be a very different landscape in terms of progress, tracking the progress and reporting on it. How did you choose the algorithms that work for Amgen?
Yeah, so we do an annual stakeholder assessment where we ask our employees, we ask investors, we do social listening to hear what all of our stakeholders universally feel is important for us to be paying attention to. There's also rating agencies who are happy to tell me what they think is important. And we do take that feedback as well.
Okay.
But we balance it out with the rest of it. And based on that, we scope our program each year, and it doesn't get smaller, but it does get bigger when we add new things. That it's not that we're doing something different, it's that we're now talking about something different and disclosing different things. I mean, there are occasions where we've started something new, but not tremendously often. As I said, this company operates without me at a very high level of ESG effectiveness. It's my job to communicate that. So that's what I try to do. And I base a lot of it off of stakeholder assessment.
How often do you benchmark what you're doing at Amgen and what your colleagues, what you and your Amgen colleagues are doing against similar industry, reports, and then also different industry reports?
So my staff would probably tell you we do it constantly. It feels like that, certainly. It's one of the services my team provides to the company. So it's rarely that we do the entire program at one time, but we pick element by element or topic by topic, and we will go benchmark against our peers. I have all of their URLs right there on my, list of quick links. Non-industry peers, we benchmark most commonly when we are looking to do something none of our peers have done. So the example I would give you is cybersecurity. When we decided we wanted to add that, none of our peers, it's not that they don't mention it, they just don't dig into it, and they don't have a ton of information. I had to go outside of our industry and look at industries that were doing a much deeper dive into their cybersecurity so that I could get an idea of what is good from a transparency perspective.
Got it. That makes total sense. Where we stand today, and as we go into the fourth quarter of 2022, talk a little bit about yourself personally. Hopeful about where we're headed as a world, as an environment, as climate change, climate risk, and where we're headed? Or give me some of your thoughts on where things are going.
Wow, you promised me no hard questions.
I lied.
I would say that I am personally pretty hopeful.
Yeah.
I worry that we're in a pretty divided universe right now. But if the way that my colleagues at Amgen, just get through it and do their work and continue to focus on the right things to do for patients and discovering new drugs and making sure that we're improving access, if I base my theories on that, then I'm pretty positive.
Got it. Now, you've been in this role for the last 18 or 19 months or so. What is the next 2 or 3 years? Now that we're starting, thank gosh, coming out of COVID, what does the next 2 or 3 years look like for you in terms of driving the mission forward?
Well, we have several goals that are very important to us. Under our Healthy Planet pillar, for example, we have announced the road to net zero. And that is all of our metrics are based on a 2019 baseline, but it's our goal to achieve carbon neutrality for Amgen-owned and operated facilities and operations, reduce water consumption by 40%, and reduce waste disposed by 75%. So those things are definitely examples of what's on our list for the next years to come. And where we are so far, interestingly, in renewable energy sources, last year, 79% of Amgen's total energy consumption was renewable.
Wow.
And that was up from 41% in 2020. And I'm really excited to see the numbers for 2022 at the end of this year.
So
but we also plan to.
So I'm interrupting you. So when you listed all those things in terms of, carbon neutrality and your net zero goals, is it the same year as your goal line, or different goal lines for the different topics?
For those three topics of water, waste, and carbon, our target is 2027.
Got it. Perfect. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. So
yeah, no, that's okay.
You made huge progress in energy. Wow.
Yeah, and with lots of concrete examples, like we're converting 30% of our fleet to electric cars. Our fleet is, of course, driven by our sales and medical reps. And we're opening a new plant in Ohio and Rhode Island, and both of those will be cutting-edge technologies that are much more efficient and environmentally friendly than traditional plants.
So did you have to? So when you're embarking on those kind of things with your hard assets of your company, do you have to work on issues such as LEED certification of the building in terms of energy, water, and all those other things that come with it?
That is right. And we aim to be LEED certified in both those facilities.
Congratulations. That's huge. That's huge. That's exciting.
Thank you.
That's very exciting. It's exciting. And
then
how does that
on the social social side, those same facilities are going to allow us to hire 750 new jobs, and those facilities are in very diverse communities on purpose.
Right.
Because that continues to be also a key target for us to improve our diversity.
Obviously, you took this role during COVID, so travel really wasn't part of the deal. Will travel become more part of your role in the coming months and years ahead?
No, I don't think so. Partly because we've really proven you can work from anywhere.
Right.
And Amgen we have a virtual first policy. And so if you need to come to the office, you're welcome to come to the office, but we prefer people work virtually if it is as productive. As far as when people will need to travel internationally, that's still up in the air as far as, what will make sense for the company. I think overall our travel will never go back to what it was pre-COVID.
Right.
We've learned enough things about how to work that we won't need to.
Do you get to go to conferences with other ESG directors from around the United States and around the world and share best practices? Is that part of also what you do?
It is. Most of the conferences I have been to so far have been virtual.
Right.
And obviously those would be reasons to travel, but my preference will always be virtual because I lose too much time in the travel.
Yeah.
That I could be working with my team.
Yeah.
So,
how big is your team now?
I have 4 people working for me.
Wow. That sounds still for 24,000 employees in 100 countries and 75 countries physically. That doesn't even sound like all that much for all the work that you're accomplishing.
Well, if you were thinking about, major disclaimer, this is not my work I'm talking to you about, right? My work is to communicate it, pull it together into a coherent story. There are thousands of people at Amgen doing the work I'm trying to describe.
Right, I know.
And, my job is to bring them together.
That's awesome, Lori. So what did you expect going into this role that didn't happen, and what didn't you expect that did happen after you took this role?
So what did happen that I expected was that I got to spend a lot of time focused on the sort of extra the beyond goodness things that Amgen do. And that's great to wake up every day and do that.
But you did expect emails from your older brother, and they came.
I actually didn't. This is the first job I've had where he has really been sort of on top of it. I mean, he used to give me trouble in other ways, but no, this one is because he's in the banking industry.
Oh.
So this is his world as well.
Interesting. Lori, we could sit here for hours. Last thoughts. I would love you to have the last thoughts before we say goodbye for today, because what you're doing is such important work, not only for Amgen, just for the world at large. Because when companies like Amgen do the important work that you're doing and go, like you said, beyond caring for patients and really go all in on ESG, other companies get inspired to follow, big and small. So I'll leave you for the last words, and then I'll do our sign off at the end here.
Okay. I think ESG isn't perfect, but I think it's the right direction for the evolution of corporate responsibility as time has gone on. And although things may change parts of it, ultimately, I believe that ESG is here to stay, and that it's the right thing for business, and that companies who are worried about getting into it are going to find it works for them. So I encourage people to learn about it and institute it wherever they can.
Lori, thank you for all the great work you're doing in sustainability and ESG at Amgen. To find Lori and her important and great colleagues and their great work that they're doing beyond caring for patients, please go to www.amgen.com. Lori Hunt, you're making a huge impact on this planet, and so is Amgen. I thank you for your time today. You're always welcome back on the Impact Podcast, and thank you for the great work you continue to do.
Thank you.
This episode of the Impact Podcast is brought to you by Closed Loop Partners. Closed Loop Partners is a leading circular economy investor in the United States with an extensive network of Fortune 500 corporate investors, family offices, institutional investors, industry experts, and impact partners. Closed Loop's platform spans the arc of capital from venture capital to private equity, bridging gaps and fostering synergies to scale the circular economy. To find Closed Loop Partners, please go to www.closedlooppartners.com.